In this video, we are going to add the remove method to our database class. First of all, again, let's create a test. So after the last one we've written under the database test class, let's create a new one called removes record. So public function removes record. There we go. And let's straight away make it a test by adding this annotation here, test. And the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm just going to scroll up a little bit. I'm going to add a new book record. So this add book. And I'm going to add title, say Book of Jungle. So we've got one record. Now let's get this record. So book equals this DB object, fetch object. And the SQL will be, it's not the variable here, there we go. The SQL will be select all from books where ID equals question mark, and then this last insert ID. We've already gone through all this, so obviously you should be familiar with what I'm doing here already. Okay, so we've got a book record now. Let's now do this assert not empty, and what we're passing through is the book. And then if it is empty, the message will say, book record not found. And again, let's put it all on new lines to keep it a little bit more readable. Okay, then we're gonna do another assertion. This time we're going to check that the title equals the given title. So this assert equals, and it's going to be Book of Jungle, and it equals book title. It needs to match. So if we put all these on new lines as well, and then a message in case it fails, book record title does not match. So this is just to confirm basically that we're dealing with the same record which we've just added. So it's not empty. We can get this record by this ID which has been generated obviously after the addition of the record, and then we're checking whether the title matches the title that we actually specified for this record. So these two assertions are okay. Then what we're going to do is actually test for removing the record from a database. So this DB, and then we go for delete method, which we don't have yet, from table books, and the record by ID of the book ID. So ID of this book object. And then we are going to do book equals, actually, let me just copy all this because it's going to be exactly same. Because we're trying to now fetch the object by the same ID. Which now should fail. Obviously we shouldn't get any record now because we've just removed it. So the expectation here is going to be that it's this assert false, and we're gonna go for book, and the message will be book record was found, because we're expecting it to return false, basically evaluate to Boolean false, whatever it's going to return. In other words, if it's empty, it's going to evaluate to false, and this is what we kind of expecting, because this record should not be found. After deleting, this record with this ID shouldn't be in a table, so it should assert false book, and if it's found, then that means that obviously delete failed because it didn't remove the record which we asked it to. Okay, so this is our test. Obviously, if we go to the terminal and if we run PHP unit again, we get the error, obviously delete method was not found, which is obviously what we would expect because we haven't got this method yet. So let's go back to our database.php file, which you'll find on the app database.php. And after our last method, the query one, let's create a few new lines and create a new method called delete. So public function delete. It obviously needs to be public because we need to be able to access it from outside of this class. Table as the first argument, table name, and then ID, and a field, because we may want to remove the record not just by the ID, but ID is going to be default, so it's going to be an optional third argument. But if you want to remove it by, let's say, if you want to remove a number of records, let's say, which share the same value for a given field, then you can specify this field, and that's going to remove them all. Okay, so we're going to start with the SQL. SQL, and we go for delete from, and then the table. There we go. So we're deleting from this table, and then where statement, this field equals question mark for the placeholder for the as a placeholder for the prepared statement. So field, whatever it's going to be, by default it's going to be ID, needs to equal, and now we are going to bind this ID with within the execute statement. So return this execute our SQL and then ID as the value that we want to bind to this placeholder. And that's all with the delete method. Let's now create the doc blocks as well here and put remove record S, because it might be multiple. If we obviously specify the field that values, this value matches several records, then it's going to be removing not just a single but multiple records. Okay, so now back to our terminal, PHP unit, and now we get the error because it says that type error argument to pass to database execute must be of a type array, and that's fine because if I'm just going to go to this execute, you can see the second argument has to be of the array type. So what I need to do is just scrolling down, making sure that this second argument is an array. So let's just wrap this ID within the square bracket. That should do the job. So if I clear the screen, run PHP unit, we have 7 tests, 12 assertions, meaning all our tests are passing. And next method in that case, because that was quite quick, let's quickly have a look at our database test. The test we are going to be writing now is going to be for the count method. And the count method is basically going to count number of records from the given table based on the, based on all of the records or any where statement that we're going to pass as a second argument. So we are going to start with the public function count returns correct number of records. And again, let's quickly make it a test. So above the method definition, let's just add test tag. And we're going to start with this add book. I'm not worried about what title and all this is, so I'm just going to multiply this 3 times. We should have now 3 records. So let's simply do this. Assert equals, and we go 3. And the second argument is going to be this db count, and we pass the first argument is going to be the name of the table books. So this should return 3 basically. If we count records inside of the books table, we've added 3 records, it should return 3. So that should be true. But obviously again, let's add the message that's going to be displayed while we're testing, and if this specific assertion failed, it's going to be saying that our books table did not return 3 records. So that's one of them. Let's now try and duplicate this one because I want to test for a second condition, for second argument of this count method, which we will have. And this time I want to make sure that this equals 2, and what I'm going to do basically add the where statement where ID is less than 3, because obviously 1, 2, 3, third record is going to have ID of 3, and everything less than 3 is going to give us just this first and a second record with ID 1 and 2. So let's quickly update the message here. The books table did not return 2 records with ID less than 3. So let's quickly go back to our terminal and give it a test. There we go. And obviously we have a problem again. Count method isn't declared on the database instance. So let's quickly go back to our database class and create it. So a few new lines. And what I'm going to start with is public function count. It takes table name as the first argument. Second argument will be where clause. So by default null, because we may return just all of the records, basically count all of the records in the table. And then this last one, parameters, if there are any to be bounded basically to the where clause. Now, again, as you can see, I'm not type hinting this. It's not going to be array by default. If we want to only pass one argument, we will be able to pass one argument without wrapping this in the brackets or array, basically. So we're going to start with the SQL again, equals, and we go for select count, and then I'm just going to put star white character here as a number. And then I'm going to go for from table. There we go. And this is going to be the beginning of the statement. Now we're going to check whether we have anything for where. So if is not exclamation mark is null where. So if where is not equal null, then that means we basically pass through the second argument. And what I'm going to do is append to the SQL statement, we are going to append this where statement. So in between the brackets, I'm doing this curly brackets where, lowercase. There we go. And this is so basically our statement here. Whatever we're going to be passing as a second argument is going to be where something blah, blah, blah. Okay, which is what we actually did here, where ID is less than 3. We could obviously use the question mark here and then pass the third argument with this ID, but we didn't have to really for this simple exercise here. Obviously testing just a simple statement like this doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so we have the where statement in case there was any, and then return this query. This time we're going for SQL, and then we go via type hinting typecasting here our parameters to the array. So array in between the brackets followed by parameters, and then I'm going to do fetch, and after this I'm going to return the array item number. And now let me just explain what is happening here. So first of all, we are going to have this statement. The query will return statement. As you can remember, if I just go back to query, it basically delegates this call to the execute, setting the fourth argument to false. If we go to execute, if it's false, if it's returned, it's going to return the result. But if it's false, then it's going to return the statement. That's why we can chain it further. And what we're doing with the statement, basically, we call the fetch method on it, which will return the records basically which are representing this entire statement. And then from the statement I want the number, which is basically the count of the records. So it's going to just return the integer basically for the number of records in a table which are matching the statement. Okay, so that's our count method. Let's now quickly add the doc blocks as well. So what we're going to put here, count records. I think that's going to do. Let's quickly go back to the terminal, PHP unit, and there we go. We've got 8 tests, 14 assertions, all of which works. Our remove and count methods work just fine. Let's move to the next video.